Well, most people on the internet are worried about who is and who isn't calling certain people out, or what dumb new mockumentary is getting put out by someone who's supposedly Charlie Kirk's friend. There's actual news coming out today, and there's actual evidence being brought forth in court today as the Tyler Robinson trial had perhaps the most brutal update that Tyler could have. It's his worst nightmare. Essentially, they had a Hail Mary where they were praying, hoping that they could get the prosecutor removed from his case for no reason whatsoever at all. And also, they have been desperately trying to get capital punishment off the table. This is what Tyler Robinson's defense team is focusing on, not really on whether or not he can beat the charges or whether or not he's guilty, but basically every possible exception to the rule that they can find. And that's what a good defense lawyer does. But in a series of 2 videos today, Tyler Robinson got absolutely horrible news. Now, I know a lot of people, even in my viewership, have their questions about what happened to Charlie Kirk. I have questions too, questions that I hope will be answered at trial, but I still remain wholly convinced that it was Tyler Robinson. If you disagree with me, that's okay. Sure, that's totally normal. I think like having questions and wondering if more people were involved than that we know about, these are fine things to do. And then there's like Candace Owens, who's making millions of dollars destroying the life of someone she once called her friend, his wife, his widow. And but that's for a different, I don't really care about what that loser does. The path has now been cleared for the death penalty against Tyler Robinson. It needs to be done publicly after he's convinced. Well, let's talk about, or convicted, if he's convicted. Look, the guy still gets his day in court. There's people that have questions about, the weapon that was used and certain angles. And, I have questions about how did, these trans radical groups seem to have prior knowledge to the event? How was there a book for sale on Amazon days before the event actually happened? These are questions that, as far as I know, the FBI is kind of poo-pooed away. Hopefully they'll come at trial. I feel like I've always believed that if Tyler Robinson did it, that Lance Twiggs, his boyfriend, was definitely a part of the planning. But let's go to the first brutal, backlash. By the way, they also allowed Tyler Robinson to appear off camera, which I think is annoying because like his reaction to things and things like that going on, I think are important for people to be able to gauge. And also I think that we're affording this guy, just like Luigi Mangione, all sorts of these special treatments when they don't deserve it. Now, here is the judge's ruling on whether or not the prosecutors could be removed from the case. And then you can watch you can watch the lawyer's reaction.
Utah County Attorney's Office. The court appreciates the patience of all parties with respect to this motion. The court has taken the necessary time to carefully review the motions submitted, consider the evidence presented, and the arguments made by counsel. And the court now reads its ruling, which will be made available and posted later today. Before the court is defendant's motion to disqualify Utah County Attorney's Office. Defendant argues that high-level prosecutor assigned to this case has a concurrent conflict of interest, and because no efforts were made to screen him, the entire office should be disqualified. Because defendant has not established a factual basis for a finding of conflict of interest or an objective appearance of impropriety rising to a constitutional concern, his motion is respectfully denied. At defendant's request, the court held an evidentiary hearing on January 6th.
Essentially, they held this and there was no evidence. There was no reason. Now, some people are really mad about it. This individual says, judge slams the door on disqualifying Utah prosecutors in Charlie Kirk murder case. Prosecutor's daughter sat in the crowd when the shots rang out. Conflict, bias, invisible. Well, his daughter is not trying the case. I don't think it was the actual prosecutor's daughter. It was somebody else in the office. So again, that's not the truth. It's how I remember it. I could be wrong, but I'm almost 100% that it was not the actual prosecutor's daughter. It was like somebody in the office. Death penalty train keeps rolling full speed. Justice system protects its own while conservatives bleed. I'm not sure who they're protecting. But here is perhaps the worst news for Tyler Robinson. The path has now been cleared for the death penalty against Tyler Robinson. It needs to be done publicly. Well, let's look at this clip.
When determining whether to seek death, prosecutorial discretion allows a prosecutor to consider a host of relevant factors when determining whether to seek death, as long as the considerations of those factors is constitutionally sound.
Sure.
Even if Mr. Gray considered the impact on daughter when deciding to seek death, defendant has not shown that the impact of the crime on victims, witnesses, or even prosecutors themselves is an unconstitutional consideration when deciding to seek the death penalty.
Now, I do want to also point out, I think what we're going to see now is a plea from Tyler Robinson. As far as I know, as far as I've seen in this court case, he has not entered a guilty or non-guilty plea. I don't know how standard that is. It may be very standard in terms of like these big, like high profile cases. But as of right now, and the evidence that I've seen, he has not even entered a plea at all. And I suppose now that they are unable to get the prosecutors off the case, which wouldn't change any of the evidence against him anyway, and they were unable to get the death penalty off the table, as he'll lay out here, you're probably going to see a plea.
In sum, the court concludes that there is not a significant risk that Mr. Grunander's loyalty to daughter has or will materially limit his representation of the state of Utah. Furthermore, defendant has not shown that there is a significant risk that Mr. Grunander's relationship with daughter has or will impact defendant's due process rights. Based on the record before the court, defendant has not shown that his prosecution by the Utah County Attorney's Office is tainted by a concurrent conflict of interest under Rule 1.7.
Another thing he says, too, is prosecutors need not be immune to the emotional response of others. They are necessarily permitted to be zealous in their enforcement of the law. No proof of undue influence or due process violations. The Utah County's Attorney's Office remains in place, and they will seek capital punishment. During oral argument, defendant requested the court also consider whether the Utah County Attorney's Office followed the process recommended by the Utah Prosecutor's Best Practices, created by the Statewide Association of Prosecutors, otherwise known as SWAP, in determining whether to disqualify the Utah County Attorney's Office. Defendant argues that best practice demands that a prosecutor avoid the appearance of bias based upon public perception. Fine.
To avoid this appearance, the Utah County Attorney's Office should have immediately screened Mr. Grunander from the rest of the office. Because it failed to do so, there is now a hint that the decision to seek the death penalty was an emotional response to Mr. Grunander's concern for his daughter.
No, there isn't actually. There actually isn't. I get that his defense team is doing what they're supposed to do. I don't know why they don't just call Candace Owens. She's got this case cracked.
The best practice.
Now, there was a noise that was made by Tyler Robinson during this, but we can't see his reaction because they've given him what Charlie Kirk didn't get, some privacy.
This document is not controlling on this court. And even if it was, the court is unpersuaded that Mr. Grunander's relationship with daughter creates an appearance of bias in this case. Prosecutors need not be immune to the emotional response of others to prosecute a case.
Right.
Indeed, it is part of a prosecutor's duty to interview witnesses and victims and evaluate the impact of an alleged crime. A prosecutor need not be disinterested on the issue whether a prospective defendant has committed the crime with which he is charged. If honestly convinced of the defendant's guilt, the prosecutor is free, indeed obligated, to be deeply interested in urging that view by any fair means. True disinterest on the issue of such a defendant's guilt is the domain of the judge and the jury, not the prosecutor.
Oops.
And this is citing from Wright. Also, prosecutors need not be entirely neutral and detached. In an adversarial system, they are necessarily permitted to be zealous in their enforcement
Here's
of
the
the
part
law.
from earlier.
After reviewing the record, the court concludes that the familial relationship at issue, without additional evidence of personal involvement or influence, does not create a reasonable perception that the prosecutorial discretion was exercised for improper reasons. Zealous advocacy remains bound by constitutional and ethical constraints, and the court finds that those boundaries have not been crossed here. This ruling is confined to the specific facts established in this record. Different circumstances, such as evidence of direct personal involvement, uniquely material testimony, or demonstrable influence over discretionary decisions, could warrant a different result.
I wonder why they're all turning their cameras on and off.
In sum, the defendant has not shown that there is a significant risk that Mr. Grunander's loyalty to daughter has or will materially limit representation of the state, nor has defendant demonstrated that his due process rights are compromised by the continued prosecution of this case.
Get wrecked. So essentially he's like, no, you can't remove the prosecutors, and no, you can't remove the death penalty. This, outside of a guilty verdict, is about as bad as news as Tyler Robinson could have gotten. His only two outs were just removed by this judge. Again, I look forward to the trial, which supposedly 88 to 89% of all evidence in discovery has been shared between partners. So after that is done, then we can probably move to some proceedings and some jury selection. So I'm hoping that we get a trial as early as April or May. I don't know because, I'm not a legal expert. And given the kind of grandiose size of this court case, it's difficult to know for sure. But what I can say is I look forward to this guy frying. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave a like on it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe or follow down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.